Welcome, dear traveler. Settle down by the fire, let the world beyond these walls fade away. The night has come quietly, wrapping the old stone villages of the past in a gentle cloak of mist. And tonight, I'll take you somewhere far beyond time, back to the age of candlelight, of knights and cloisters, of whispers and wonder, to the medieval world, where stories still linger like echoes in the halls of history. You see, there were once things people cherished deeply. Traditions, foods, pastimes, songs. But sometimes one single soul, one foolish act, or one fateful moment was enough to make something vanish forever. Vanished, forgotten, lost to time. So close your eyes now and listen. We will wander through 6 quiet tales of the medieval night, each a piece of a world that once was, each a breath of the past to carry you into dreams. There once was a night long, long ago, when the heart of a kingdom pulsed with laughter and light. It was the eve of the harvest feast, a night awaited all year, when golden sheaves of wheat had been gathered, and the fields outside the castle lay quiet and bare, their purpose fulfilled beneath the gentle sighs of the autumn wind. Inside the great hall, everything shimmered. Candles glowed in iron sconces, casting rivers of light along the polished stone walls. Musicians tuned their lutes softly in the corner, and servants hurried with baskets of fruit, warm loaves of bread, and honey poured thick from clay pots. At the center of it all was a single creation, a dish so rare, so beloved, that people whispered it was kissed by angels. They called it the Queen's Crescent, a golden pastry filled with almond cream, sweetened with the last honey of summer. Its scent so soft and warm that even the wary guards at the gates smiled when it drifted past. The baker, a humble man named Rowan, had spent 3 nights preparing it. He worked beneath the glow of candlelight, folding each layer of dough with care, whispering little blessings as he worked. Not grand spells or charms, just quiet hopes that the world would taste a moment of peace. When at last the feast began, the nobles entered in a swirl of silk and laughter. The king sat tall upon his chair, his eyes kind but tired, for the kingdom had weathered a long and restless summer, and beside him sat Lord Edrin, a man of wealth and envy, known for the jeweled rings that covered his hands and the coldness that never left his smile. When the golden pastry was placed upon the table, the hall fell into reverent silence. Its aroma filled the air, soft honey, roasted almonds, a whisper of warm spice. People leaned forward, drawn as though by a dream. Even the musicians paused, their fingers still upon the strings. The king tasted first, and the hall erupted in gentle applause as he smiled, a small, wary, grateful smile. But Lord Edrin, he frowned. "It is sweet," he said quietly, but simple. "Where is the richness I asked for? Where are the spices I brought from the eastern caravans?" The baker bowed, trembling slightly. "My lord," he said softly, "this dish has always been simple. It honors the fields, the bees, the hands that shape the bread." But Edrin would not listen. Pride stirred within him like a storm. He demanded the pastry be remade. Richer, rarer, a version only he would eat. And though it was against custom to alter the sacred recipe, the baker obeyed. That night a new crescent was served, the same golden crust, but filled now with strange and costly spice, its scent sharper, foreign and bold. Edrin ate greedily. The hall watched in uneasy silence. Moments later, he fell pale and still. A hush spread like frost across the room. The king rose, his face stricken, and though the cause was never known, whether the spice was spoiled or his greed too heavy, fear gripped every heart. Whispers began. "Witchcraft," they said. "Cursed honey," others murmured. By dawn the story had grown, and by evening the decree was made. The Queen's Crescent was to be banned forever. Every recipe burned, every oven that had baked it silenced, and poor Rowan the baker vanished quietly from the castle gates, his hands still dusted with flour, his heart broken but calm. He returned to his small cottage by the woods, where he baked only for himself, simple bread, humble loaves, each one a whisper of what had once been. The kingdom mourned in its own way. Festivals continued, but they were never quite the same. The scent of honeyed almond was gone from the air, and the feasts, though grand, felt hollow, as if a piece of joy had been erased. Years later, when Rowan was old and gray, a traveler came to his door on a winter night. The wind howled softly, and snowflakes clung to the stranger's cloak. "I've heard," the traveler said, "that once there was a pastry that could make people smile. Do you remember how it was made?" The baker smiled gently, his eyes glowing like embers beneath the wrinkles of age. "I remember," he whispered. But it was never truly the pastry that brought the smile. It was the love folded into it, the quiet care, the warmth. He offered the traveler a small piece of bread, simple, unsweetened, but made with the same slow devotion. And when the stranger bit into it, something in his heart softened, as though he could taste the lost sweetness of a gentler world. Outside, the wind eased, the snow stopped falling, and in that stillness the scent of honey and almonds seemed to drift once more through the night. Not real, perhaps, but remembered. And sometimes memory is enough. So, if you ever walk through a quiet village and catch the faint aroma of something sweet on the evening air, pause for a moment. Perhaps the past is closer than it seems. Perhaps the feast that vanished still lingers, not in castles or courts, but in the hearts of those who still believe in the soft, golden beauty of simple things. There was once a village resting in the curve of a green valley, where the mountains breathed mist into the dawn, and the evenings always came softly, like a warm sigh at the end of a long day. It was a place where music lived, not in grand halls or crowded taverns, but in the air itself. When the sun began to fade behind the pines, you could hear it. The faint, trembling hum of lutes being tuned, the gentle brush of fingers across strings, the heartbeat of a world that sang itself to sleep. Every evening, the villagers would gather by the river's edge. Children carried candles cupped in their palms. The elders sat wrapped in wool cloaks, their faces silvered by the moonlight. And when the first star rose, bright and steady above the mountains, the musicians would begin to play. The melody was always the same, a quiet, rippling tune known as the Song of Stars. No one knew who first composed it. It had simply existed, passed from one pair of hands to another, a legacy of peace and belonging. The notes were simple, but in their simplicity lay something beautiful, something that made the heart ache and ease at once. It was said the song could calm storms, soothe sleepless infants, and bring tears to those who had forgotten how to feel. And so, each night, under the hush of the sky, the valley glowed with light and sound, a harmony of strings, laughter, and wind, until one day a new minstrel arrived. His name was Kalen. He came from far away, from the cities beyond the forest, where gold spoke louder than music, and songs were sold instead of shared. He carried a fine lute made of black wood and silver strings, and his eyes were bright with hunger, not for food, but for fame. The villagers welcomed him with warmth. They offered him bread, a cup of spiced wine, and a place among their circle by the river. And when night fell, Callan played. At first, he followed the familiar melody, each note soft and measured. But as the song went on, something shifted. He added new chords, strange rhythms, sounds that did not belong to the valley's peace. The air trembled. The river seemed to shiver. Children stopped their humming, and the candles flickered wildly in the wind. The melody twisted, becoming darker, faster, a haunting echo of itself, beautiful, but dangerous, like a flame too close to dry grass. When the final note faded, silence fell. No one spoke. Even the stars seemed dimmer. The next morning, whispers filled the village. Some said the music had stirred something in their hearts, a forgotten sorrow. Others said they dreamt of strange shadows moving through the pines. And when the elders gathered, their voices low, they agreed that something precious had been broken. That night, when Callan lifted his lute again, the eldest of the musicians, a gentle woman named Marin, placed her hand over his. The Song of Stars, she said softly, was never meant to change. It belongs to the silence between us, not to pride, not to glory. But Callan only smiled. Songs must grow, he said. They must rise beyond the hills. And again, he played. This time the sky itself seemed to recoil. The wind howled through the trees and the river churned with restless foam. When the last chord rang out, a loud snap echoed. One of the silver strings had broken. The sound was sharp, like the crack of lightning in the still of night. The next morning, the villagers found the old oak by the river split clean down its middle. The roots were dry, the soil cold. The elders bowed their heads, and the decree was spoken. From that day on, no lute, no harp, no fiddle was to be played at dusk. The music that once called peace into being was banned forever. The instruments were stored away, wrapped in cloth, hidden in attics and barns. The valley fell silent. The stars rose each night to find no song waiting for them. Only the whisper of the river, the quiet breathing of the land. Callan left soon after. No one saw him go. Some said he vanished into the forest, carrying his broken lute, seeking forgiveness from the very trees that had once swayed to his music. But the silence he left behind was not cruel. It became a different kind of song, a song made of stillness. People began to listen again, not with their ears, but with their hearts. They heard the rhythm of rain upon the roof, the soft clatter of a cup being set upon a table, the slow beating of their own pulse as they drifted towards sleep. In the absence of melody, they rediscovered peace. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon hangs low and the wind moves gently through the valley grass, you can still hear it. A faint, trembling tune, woven into the breath of the earth. Not loud, not proud, just a whisper. A reminder that beauty does not need to shout to be heard. For even when music fades, its echo remains, lingering softly, forever cradled in the stillness of the night. Once, in the quiet heart of a medieval kingdom, there was a river so calm that it mirrored the heavens. They called it the River of Rest, a silver ribbon that wound its way through meadows and moonlit fields, carrying the dreams of the village gently out to the sea. Every spring, when the air grew soft and the cherry trees opened their pale pink hands, the people of the village would gather by the water's edge for a night unlike any other. It was called the Festival of Lanterns. It was said that this tradition had begun centuries ago, when 2 stars fell from the sky and landed as glowing petals upon the river. The elders told children that those stars had been lovers, parted by fate, who had found each other again upon the water. And so every year the people honored them by lighting lanterns of their own and setting them free upon the current. At dusk, the fields would be alive with color. Women in linen gowns walked slowly toward the river, their hair braided with wildflowers. Men carried baskets of reeds, carefully woven into the round shapes of lanterns. And the children, wide-eyed, barefoot, their laughter gentle as wind chimes, followed with candles in hand, their hearts full of stories. When the first lantern touched the surface of the water, a hush would fall. One by one, the lights would drift away, tiny suns floating upon the dark. It was said that each flame carried a wish, a prayer, or a love that could not be spoken aloud. Among those who came each year was Alara, the daughter of the Lord of the Valley, and Finn, a humble farmer who worked the wheat fields just beyond the walls. They had known each other since childhood, their laughter often echoing through the orchards as they ran between the trees. But as the years passed, the world began to build walls between them. Walls of name and class and expectation. Still, when the Festival of Lanterns came, they would meet by the riverbank, under the old willow whose roots curled into the stream. There, away from the gaze of the court and the fields, they spoke softly, their voices like 2 notes in a song the stars themselves had written. That night, the moon was bright and full, casting a path of silver across the water. The lanterns floated gently, a constellation born upon the earth. Finn held his lantern in his hands, a simple one, made of rice paper and willow reeds. Alara's was different, trimmed with gold leaf, a gift from her father's hall. He smiled shyly. "Yours is far finer than mine." But she shook her head. "It's not the lantern that matters," she said softly. "It's the light inside it." And then, with the tenderness of 2 souls who knew their world would never understand their love, they set their lanterns side by side upon the water. The flames touched, and for a moment, they burned brighter than all the others. From the hill above, unseen by them both, Lord Arden, Alara's father, watched. He saw the mingling of their lights, and his heart, hardened by years of pride and loss, filled not with understanding but anger. By morning, he had declared the festival forbidden. "No more lanterns," he said. "No more foolish dreams upon the river." And just like that, the tradition was gone. The river grew darker in the years that followed. Spring came and went, but no lights danced upon the water. No songs rose into the night. The people whispered of the curse of the Lord, and of the love that had dared to shine too brightly. Alara was kept within the stone walls of her father's manor. Finn was sent far away, to tend the outer fields where no sound of the river could be heard. And though the seasons passed, neither forgot. Sometimes, on moonlit nights, Alara would climb the tower of her room, and there, far below, she thought she could see one small light drifting along the current, a single lantern glowing faintly, like a promise that refused to die. Years later, when Lord Arden was gone and the manor had fallen quiet, the villagers found Alara sitting by the river again. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her hands trembled as she lit a small flame. Beside her lay a lantern, the same one she had carried all those years ago. She whispered something, perhaps a name, perhaps a wish, and set it gently upon the water. The current caught it. The flame danced steady and sure, and then another appeared beside it. From down the stream, a second light had come drifting toward hers. It glowed faintly, its paper worn and torn by time, but still alive. The 2 lanterns touched again, their lights merging into one, just as they had long ago. And as the villagers watched, they swore they saw 2 figures standing in the reflection, hand in hand, smiling softly beneath the moon. From that night on, the ban was forgotten. The people once more lit their lanterns, and the river bloomed with stars. Each year, they told the story of the lovers whose light could not be dimmed by time or fear. And even now, if you stand by a quiet stream, when the night is still and the moon is high, you might see a pair of small lanterns drifting side by side, two gentle flames, carrying love across the endless dark. So rest now, dear dreamer, and imagine those floating lights, gliding softly on water that never ends, guided only by the quiet pulse of hope. Because love, true, patient, unyielding, never fades. It simply finds new ways to shine. Once, in a valley bathed in soft golden light, there were fields that stretched farther than the eye could see. From the high hills above, the land looked like a vast sea of amber, each stalk of wheat swaying gently in rhythm with the wind, as though the earth itself was breathing in slow, easy waves. The people of the valley called it the Plain of Whispers, for when the breeze moved through the grain at dusk, it carried a sound like distant voices. A song of comfort, of gratitude, of home. Each year, when the last harvest was gathered, the people held a celebration unlike any other. There were no grand halls or royal tables, no jewels or trumpets or proclamations, only laughter and dance. As the sun sank low and the fields shimmered with fading gold, the villagers would take off their shoes and step barefoot into the warm soil. Musicians played softly at the edge of the field, the lilt of a flute, the pulse of a drum, and soon the air was alive with the sound of joy. Children spun in circles, their hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Elders clapped to the rhythm, smiling through tears. And lovers traced slow paths through the wheat, their fingers brushing against the ripened stalks, their hearts as light as the evening wind. It was a dance of thanks. To the earth, to the seasons, to the simple gift of enough. Each footstep pressed a quiet promise into the ground that they would honor what was given, that they would tread with care. But one year, as the festival began, a knight came riding from the north. His armor gleamed like silver glass, his horse dark and tall. He was not from their valley. He belonged to the court beyond the mountains, where pride rode higher than peace. His name was Sir Alaric, and he had heard tales of the harvest dance, a gathering where even the lowliest farmer moved as free as a lord. Curiosity brought him there, and yet when he saw the people's joy, something sharp and restless stirred within him. Perhaps it was envy. Perhaps he had forgotten how to feel so free. The villagers welcomed him kindly. They offered him bread, a cup of cider fragrant with apple and spice. But when they invited him to join the dance, he laughed, softly, yet without warmth. "I do not dance in dirt," he said, and turned his horse toward the heart of the field. The elders called out to stop him, but pride is a heavy thing, and his heart could not hear. He rode through the golden sea, his horse's hooves crushing the ripened grain. The laughter stilled. The music faltered. A silence spread across the valley, a silence so deep that even the birds above ceased their song. When at last the knight looked back, he saw the faces of the people, not angry, not vengeful, only sorrowful. He dismounted slowly, realizing too late what he had done. The stalks lay broken in his wake, their golden heads pressed into the soil. A single act, and the rhythm of the dance was gone. That night, a storm came. The wind rose in bitter gusts and the rain fell hard, washing the fields clean of prints and laughter alike. When dawn returned, the grain stood still, heavy bowed, no longer whispering. The elders met beneath the willow at the field's edge. They spoke little. There was no anger, only a quiet grief. The festival, they decided, would never be held again. The fields would be left to grow untouched, a resting place of memory. And so the years passed. The children who once danced there grew old. The music faded into stories told by firelight. The valley became hushed and solemn, a place where travelers walked softly, as though afraid to disturb the ghosts of laughter sleeping in the grain. But the land remembers. The earth never forgets the rhythm of footsteps it has loved. And sometimes, on late summer evenings, when the sun leans low and the air hums with warmth, the wind returns to the Plain of Whispers. It moves through the wheat like a sigh, and those who listen closely swear they can hear it. The faint echo of drums, the laughter of children, the soft rustle of joy long gone. In a small cottage near the edge of the valley lived a young woman named Isla. She had grown up hearing her grandmother's stories of the dance that once blessed the land. Though the festival had been forbidden long before she was born, she often wandered into the fields at twilight barefoot, letting the stalks brush against her hands. One evening, as the wind began to stir, she closed her eyes and took a single step, then another. Her movements were slow, gentle, guided by something she could not name, a memory carried in her blood, in the rhythm of the soil beneath her feet. The breeze lifted her hair. The golden grain swayed with her, bending and rising as though dancing too. In that moment, the valley seemed to awaken. Not loudly, not suddenly, but with quiet recognition, like an old friend smiling in its sleep. The whisper returned, soft, steady, full of peace. By the time the moon rose, the air shimmered with stillness once more. And though Isla never spoke of it, those who passed her cottage afterward said they often saw the fields moving gently at night, as if remembering the old festival. No one tried to stop it. No one called it forbidden, for they understood. Some things once lost do not need to be reclaimed loudly. They simply need to be remembered quietly, lovingly in the slow turning of the earth. And so, the plain of whispers breathed again. The fields sang softly to the wind, and peace, gentle, wordless, eternal, came home, high among the mountain ridges, where the air was thin and sweet, and the mornings were wrapped in a veil of silver mist. There lay a village so small it did not appear on any map. It was a quiet place, a scattering of cottages, a single cobblestone path, and a bell tower that rose like a guardian over them all. The tower had stood for centuries. Its stones were weathered and pale, its narrow windows framed the endless sweep of the sky. At its heart hung 3 bronze bells, each one different in tone. One deep and warm, one bright and clear, and one that sang so softly, it was said only those with kind hearts could truly hear it. Every evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains and the valley turned to gold, the bells would ring. Their music drifted down through the village, across the fields, and into the forest beyond. It was a sound that meant safety. It meant home. It meant that the day's work was done and the world was allowed at last to rest. The villagers loved their bells. Children would lie awake at night, listening for the last, gentle chime before sleep carried them into dreams. Travelers said the sound felt like a blessing, a lullaby of bronze and air. But one year, as winter lingered longer than it should have, a sadness crept quietly into the village. Snow fell heavier than before, and the winds howled through the passes as though the mountains themselves had forgotten mercy. In one small cottage near the edge of the woods lived a man named Darren. He was a craftsman, a maker of tools, a mender of things that others had given up on. But that winter, it was not his hands that broke, it was his heart. For his wife, Mira, the light of his days, fell ill with a fever no medicine could mend. Each night, as she lay sleeping fitfully beside the hearth, the sound of the bells drifted through the window, soft, tender, full of peace. And yet to Darren, that peace felt cruel. He could not bear their calm when his world was falling silent. He could not stand the sound of comfort when comfort no longer reached his home. So one night, when the snow glowed pale under a full, watchful moon, Darren rose from his bed, took his lantern, and began the long climb to the tower. The path was steep. The stones slicked beneath his boots. The wind whispered around him, a mournful song of warning, but he pressed on. When he reached the top, he pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped into the stillness. The bells hung above him, silent now, their bronze skins gleaming faintly in the moonlight that poured through the cracks. He stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the mountain, the creak of the ropes, the breath of the cold air. Then, slowly, he reached up and took hold of the ropes. With trembling hands, he tied them fast. No more ringing, no more songs, only silence. When the villagers woke the next morning, the air felt heavy. They waited for the bells to sound, but none came. At first, they thought the snow had frozen the ropes, or that the wind had muffled the chimes. But as days passed and the stillness held, they began to worry. When they found Darren at the tower's base, he said only this: "The bells will sleep now. The world is too loud for grief." And though their hearts ached for him, no one could find the words to change his mind. So the bells remained still. The evenings came quietly, the mountains wrapped in an unfamiliar hush. Strangely, over time, the village began to change. People spoke more softly. They lingered longer by their fires. They learned to listen, to the snow as it fell, to the sigh of the pines, to the steady rhythm of their own hearts. The silence that Darren had created became something holy, not empty, but full of things that had been forgotten in the noise of the world. And then, one spring morning, as the frost melted from the rooftops and the valley filled again with birdsong, the sound of a single chime drifted through the air, soft, fragile, pure. The villagers looked up in wonder. The smallest bell, the one said to sing only for kind hearts, was ringing on its own, moved not by rope, but by the mountain breeze. When Darren heard it, he felt a warmth rise within him, not sharp but gentle, a warmth like the memory of sunlight after long winter. He went to the tower, his steps slow but sure, and there, in the still light of morning, he untied the ropes, one by one. When he pulled the final knot loose, the largest bell swung free and sang, a deep, soft tone that rolled across the valley like a wave. The middle bell followed, bright and clear, and then the smallest once more, a silver note that shimmered in the air. The three tones blended together, carrying not sorrow, not joy, but peace, pure and complete. From that day on, the bells rang only once each evening, not loud, not insistent, but gently, as if reminding the world that rest and remembrance can live together. And Darren, who had once silenced them out of pain, would stand by his cottage door, eyes closed, listening. He no longer feared their song. It was no longer something that stood apart from grief, but something that carried it softly, safely into stillness. So now, when you hear the echo of distant bells, somewhere beyond the edge of dreams, know that they ring not for sorrow or for warning, but for peace. For endings that become beginnings, for hearts that remember and rest. Let their sound guide you now. Let it drift through your mind like warm wind through an open window. The night is calm, the bells are singing, and all is well. Far beyond the hills where the bells once sang, beyond forests woven in silver mist and meadows kissed by dawn, there was said to be a kingdom so quiet that even the wind moved softly when it passed through. They called it the Quiet Kingdom, a realm untouched by time, where the rivers never rushed and the stars stayed longer in the night sky as if they, too, wished to rest there. No one knew exactly where it lay. Some believed it could only be found in dreams. Others said it appeared to travelers who no longer sought anything at all. But those who claimed to have seen it spoke of a land where peace was not a passing feeling. It was the very air you breathed. The story begins with Alara, a young historian from a neighboring valley. She had spent her life gathering tales of the old world, songs, legends, and half-forgotten truths. Her heart was gentle but restless, filled with questions that no book could answer. One evening, while sorting scrolls by candlelight, she found a fragment written in fading ink. It spoke of a bell that rang in silence, a gate that opened only when one walked without purpose, and a kingdom where all noise turned to peace. The words shimmered in the dim light, as though they were waiting for her. Elora smiled faintly. She did not know why, but she felt as though something or someone was calling her home. The next morning, she set out alone, carrying nothing but a small satchel, a loaf of bread, and a feathered light heart that longed for stillness. The air was cool and gentle, the clouds drifted lazily across the sky. As she walked, the world seemed to slow around her. The sound of her boots on the path softened. The birds sang in low, rhythmic tones. Even the wind seemed to move in time with her breath. By dusk, she reached a valley bathed in twilight gold. There, among tall reeds, stood a single stone archway, half crumbled, half forgotten, yet glowing faintly in the fading light. No road led through it, no guards stood by, no words were carved upon its face. And yet, Alara felt certain that this was the gate she had read about, the one that only opened for those who sought nothing. She hesitated for just a moment, then exhaled, letting go of every question that still clung to her mind. And as she did, the world seemed to hold its breath. A gentle hum filled the air. Not quite music, not quite silence, something between the two. The reeds swayed softly, and the archway shimmered like water touched by moonlight. Elora stepped forward. The moment she passed through, a deep, sweet stillness washed over her. It was as though every sound she had ever known had folded itself into a single, endless note. A sound not heard by ears, but felt by the soul. She stood upon a hillside overlooking the quiet kingdom. Below her, the fields glowed like silk beneath 1,000 soft stars. Rivers curved through the land like ribbons of glass, their waters whispering lullabies only the heart could hear. There were no castles, no armies, no crowns, only light and life and rest. As she walked down the slope, she noticed figures moving among the meadows, not bustling, not hurried, but graceful and serene. They wore robes of pale blue and silver, their eyes filled with peace. When they smiled at her, it felt like remembering a dream she had long forgotten. One of them, an elder with hair as white as moonlight, spoke in a voice as soft as falling rain. "Welcome, traveler. You have come far not by distance but by stillness. Here the noise of the world ends, and what remains is truth." Alara bowed her head, tears gathering quietly in her eyes. She had not realized until that moment how long she had carried the weight of sound. The endless rush of thoughts, the ache of unanswered questions, the hum of days spent searching for meaning. Here, in this quiet kingdom, all of that melted away. There was no need to know, no need to prove, no need to reach, only to be. The elder led her to a lake at the kingdom's heart. Its surface reflected both the stars above and the stars within her eyes. She sat by the shore, and time, if it still existed there, slowed to the rhythm of her breath. Hours or perhaps lifetimes passed. And when she finally rose, she felt lighter than she had ever felt before. She realized then what the quiet truly was, not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. When dawn touched the horizon, she turned to leave. The elder smiled gently. "You will return to your world," he said, "and its noise will greet you once more. But remember, the quiet is not a place, it is within you. Carry it home and it will guide you even in the loudest days." Alara nodded. She stepped back through the gate, and the hum of the world slowly returned. The rustle of leaves, the song of birds, the rhythm of her own heartbeat. But now the sounds no longer felt heavy. They were all part of one great symphony. A song she could finally hear clearly. And when she reached her cottage again, she sat by her window as night fell, watching the stars through the quiet glow of the fire. She smiled softly and whispered, "The kingdom lives within me now." Outside, a bell rang far in the distance, a low, soothing tone that drifted through the night air like a lullaby. And as its final echo faded into stillness, Elara closed her eyes, wrapped in the peace she had found. The quiet kingdom had not vanished. It was simply waiting, in every gentle breath, in every slow heartbeat, in every calm moment between waking and dreams. So now, as you listen, let that same peace settle over you. Feel it drift through your thoughts, soft as starlight on water. The world outside can wait. This is your quiet kingdom. It lives within you now, and it will never fade. Before you drift away, remember, you are not alone in this quiet world of dreams. Subscribe to Cozy Camp Stories and let your nights be filled with peace, one story at a time.